MY Racing officially announces that they will attempt the Daytona 500 with Greg Biffle, and Austin Hill will drive for Spire Motorsports in the Daytona Truck Series opener. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. If you've got a ton of NASCAR and other motorsports story discussed here today on the channel, let's go ahead and just jump straight into those really quickly. We're going to go ahead and start off with the paint schemes and sponsorship news. Let's jump into those stories really quickly. The first paint scheme we're going to take a look at is Chase Purdy's 2020 David S. Gray scheme that we're going to see in the Truck Series opener at Daytona. I like this paint scheme a lot. The colors look really cool. It's also great to see that an artist is sponsoring this weekend. I think it's a nice looking paint scheme. They did a pretty good job on it, and I'm looking forward to seeing it on the racetrack in 2022 as well. The next paint scheme we're going to take a look at is Bailey Curry's 2022 KSDT CPA scheme that we're going to see in multiple races in 2022. Not much different from the scheme, but I've always been a big fan of this paint scheme last year, especially in Atlantic Castle Drummond. They've had a sponsor for the last couple of years. They did a pretty good job on this paint scheme, and I'm looking forward to seeing it on the racetrack in 2022 as well. The next paint scheme we're going to take a look at is Atlantic Castle's 2022 Fox Nation scheme that we're going to see in the Daytona 500. This is confirmed now that he'll race in Daytona 500. This paint scheme is definitely very controversial. A lot of people are not going to like this paint scheme due to the sponsor on the car. I think it's good at least that they have a sponsor for him, but I think it's very controversial, and it's going to cause a lot of controversy, to be honest with you. The next paint scheme we're going to take a look at is Clay Greenfield's 2022 Backyard Blue scheme that we're going to see in the Truck Series opener. I like this paint scheme a lot. They did a really good job on this truck. Hopefully this truck will be able to qualify in. Hopefully Bruce Cook's team can qualify in. It's a good looking truck, and I'm looking forward to seeing it on the racetrack in 2022 as well. The next paint scheme we're going to take a look at is Corey Heim's 2022 JBL scheme that we're going to see in quite a few races this year, including in Daytona. Not much has changed with the scheme. It's very similar to the usual schemes. Again, it's not a bad scheme. It's basically the same scheme as we've seen in the past. So it's an alright looking paint scheme, and I'm looking forward to seeing it on the racetrack in 2022. The next paint scheme we're going to take a look at is Austin Hill's 2022 Bennett and United Rental scheme that we're going to see in the Xfinity Series opener at Daytona. I like this paint scheme a lot. They did a really good job. RCR tends to do a really good job on their paint schemes. This one's no exception. I like it a lot. I'm looking forward to seeing it on the racetrack in 2022. The next paint scheme we're going to take a look at is Brad Keselowski and Chris Buescher, both of their 2020 Wyndham Reward schemes that we're going to see throughout 2022. Cool to see that both of them are getting sponsored by Wyndham Rewards this season. I like this a lot. The numbers in a really good position. Colors are really good. They match very perfectly. They did a really good job on this paint scheme, and I'm looking forward to seeing it on the racetrack in 2022. The next paint scheme we're going to take a look at is Parker Kligerman's 2022 Food Country Truck USA scheme that we're going to see in the Truck Series opener at Daytona and probably every single race as well. I like this paint scheme a lot. They did a really good job on it. I like to see sponsors like that continue to sponsor, and I'm looking forward to see it on the racetrack in 2022 as well. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Sam Mayer's 2022 Accelerated Professional Talent Solution scheme that we're going to see at Daytona and a couple races in 2022. Overall, I think this paint scheme looks really cool. Glad to see this paint scheme is returning in 2022, and I'm looking forward to see it on the racetrack in 2022 as well. The next paint scheme we're going to take a look at is Todd Gilliland's 2022 Rude Bush Development scheme that we're going to see in multiple races in 2022, including Road America and I think Worldwide Technology as well. Interesting paint scheme, to be honest with you. I like the color scheme of it, the color variation of the white and blue. I think did a really good job. The numbers are also in a good position as well. Overall, they did a really good job on it, and I'm looking forward to seeing on the racetrack as well in 2022. And a final paint scheme as of now we are taking a look at is Greg Galding's 2022 Safe Hedge scheme that we're going to see at the Daytona season opener. It's good to see that another sponsor is coming in and sponsoring in 2022. I know it's a crypto sponsorship, and that's very controversial, but it's good to see that Greg Galding is going to be sponsored. Very happy about that for sure, and hopefully this will help them get a good start to the year in 2022. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Charles Woodson. As was announced on Friday that Charles Woodson is going to be the Grand Marshal for the Daytona 500. Charles Woodson is a Hall of Famer in the National Football League and is a legend of the football game. So having him come in and be the Grand Marshal for the event, I think is very awesome and very cool. So really happy to see that for sure. They're going to be having him in the event to work at that. I think that's really awesome, and I'm glad to see that Charles Woodson is going to be going ahead and being the Grand Marshal for this year's Daytona 500. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Trackhouse Racing. As was announced on Friday, and this is reported by Adam Stern, that Trackhouse Racing has joined the Race Team Alliance after it wasn't part of the group in 2021. This means every single charter team is now officially part of the Race Team Alliance. Last of the new teams of 2311 and Live Fast joined the Race Team Alliance. Trackhouse was not part of that Race Team Alliance, but now they're officially part of the Race Team Alliance. You know my opinions on the RTA. I'm not overall a big fan of them, but it is what it is, and it is important for teams to join that since it is an organization. You want to be part of that RTA so you can get all the benefits and stuff. Overall, they officially are now part of the RTA. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're going to talk about the LGBT coin. As this was reported by multiple reports that the LGBT coin has unfortunately become a dumpster fire as it's lost all of its value. All the trillions of dollars have gone into that coin. I think they had like $330 trillion has now been reduced to thousands of dollars over the last 30 days. It's lost 99% of its value and basically it's lost all the value that it has. This does not surprise me, to be honest with you. It does not surprise that this coin has lost all its value, considering it is a meme coin and you were not going to be making much profit and much revenue off of it. So if he had, he probably should have cashed it in. But it does not surprise me that the LGBT coin is basically was not legitimate. It really does not surprise me, to be honest with you. So no surprise there to me that basically was no surprise to me that basically it was not a great sponsored scheme, to be honest with you, and basically no surprise that it fell through. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're going to talk about the LA Coliseum as one of Jeff Gluck's co-workers is now a piece part of the Athletic but also part of the New York Times. Basically, one of the co-workers works at him was flying to the Super Bowl a couple of days ago, and Jeff Gluck reported that there was an image that came out showing what the LA Coliseum currently likes at the moment after 6 days. And if you look at the track, it is basically almost gone after a whole entire week. It's very unfortunate because I think that I wish the track would have been able to stay around. I know it's a USC. They basically have a lot of football games and other major events going on in the future. But it's unfortunate because that track was so beautiful. They put like $1 million or $2 million into the event. And it's just super unfortunate that basically all the money they put into is now gone after it. But it is what it is. I hope they do come back here next for the LA Clash because I think it would be really, really awesome. And hopefully we do come back here and do the LA Clash in the future. I think that would be freaking sick, to be honest with you. So it's unfortunate the track is gone, but it is what it is. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Matt Hurston. Now, this past weekend was the NASCAR Wheel Modified Tour season opener at New Smyrna. I think this is the first time that the Wheel Modified Tour has ever raced at New Smyrna. And Matt Hurston picked up the first victory at the track. He had a lot of competition from Ryan Preece, and Ryan Preece actually took the lead around lap 75 of the event. But unfortunately, Ryan Preece got caught up in traffic and got involved in a wreck with 60 laps to go. And then Matt Hurston was able to take the victory. Congratulations to Matt Hurston on picking up the victory in the opening race at New Smyrna. Having a guy like him go to victory lane is really, really cool. And the race apparently was really, really good too. I didn't watch it, but it's really cool to see that a guy like Matt Hurston was able to come through and win the race and take the victory. So huge congratulations to him, and really, really glad to see that Matt Hurston was able to win the season opening race for the NASCAR Wheel Modified Tour. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Bubba Wallace. Now, Bubba Wallace was featured in a Super Bowl ad and a Super Bowl commercial for McDonald's. That's right. McDonald's had their own Super Bowl commercial. They had Kanye West in their commercial and a lot of people that go to McDonald's. But they also feature Bubba Wallace doing a pit stop and a pit crew. No surprise here, to be honest with you, that Bubba Wallace is featured, considering the fact Bubba is one of the most relevant drivers currently in NASCAR at the moment. But also, Bubba Wallace is sponsored by McDonald's, and they sponsor for a lot of races, and they have a much more affiliation with them. So it's not a major surprise to me that they're going to have Bubba Wallace be in the McDonald's commercial. And I thought the ad was really, really cool. There were a lot of cool Super Bowl ads there at the Super Bowl. I just think it's really, really awesome and sick that Bubba Wallace had his own McDonald's commercial. I think that's pretty awesome, to be honest with you. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're going to talk about that LA Coliseum little mini race that they had. Now, we already talked about this on the channel, I think, on Monday or Tuesday of last week, how they had a little bit of a race between four drivers, between Ryan Blaney, Chase Elliott, Bubba Wallace, and Dale Earnhardt Jr. Two of them chose for the Bengals. I think it was Ryan Blaney and I think it was Ryan Blaney and Bubba Wallace chose for the Bengals, and Chase Elliott Dale Jr., who decided to go with the Rams and decided to do a little bit of race for the Super Bowl. And this was also, of course, promotion for the Daytona 500. I don't remember who won the race. I didn't really watch the ad, but I think it's really cool that you have an ad like this and basically like a little bit of promotion for the Daytona 500, considering that this week is the Daytona 500 and a lot of cool stuff's coming for the 500, by the way. But I think it's really, really awesome and very, very cool to see that they had a little bit of a Super Bowl ad, basically a little bit of promotion for the Super Bowl as for the Daytona 500 as well. That race was really, really cool, and I'm glad to see that all four of those people were able to get involved with that, to be honest with you. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about the Daytona 500. As was officially announced this morning by multiple reporters and everybody that the Daytona 500 is completely sold out for this Sunday's Daytona 500, including suites in the infield. They are expecting between 130,000 to 150,000 fans to show up at this year's Daytona 500. That is huge considering we did not have a full capacity last year. I think only 20% capacity was allowed in last year's Daytona 500. And the fact that they're going to have almost between 130,000 and 150,000 fans allowed in this year's Daytona 500, I think is really, really awesome and pretty freaking sick, to be honest with you. And this Daytona 500 is a lot of hype around it. We just have to hope and pray that the rain holds off. And last time I checked the weather, it actually looked really, really good so far. So hopefully the weather can hold off for this year's Daytona 500. If it can hold off for this year's Daytona 500, I think that would be really, really big for this year's Daytona 500. So let's hope the Daytona 500 doesn't have any rain issues like it's had the last couple of years. And hopefully we can get Daytona 500. If it does, this could be really, really big for the ratings department, especially with this promotion they've had for the 500. This could be really, really big for the Daytona 500, to be honest with you. Let's hope that there's no issues in regards to that, to be honest with you. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Busch Beer. As it was announced this morning that Anheuser-Busch and its Busch Beer brand would announce that they would be spending $10 million over the next 3 years to sponsor every woman driver in NASCAR who is over the age of 21 years old. Basically, I think it's Accelerate Woman. I think that's the promotion they're doing for the event. And it was a promotion that will have all female drivers over 21 that would be getting spent on. This includes Jennifer Jo Cobb, Amber Bellikine, Natalie Decker, Tony Breidinger, I think Stephanie Moyer, Heather Feifeld, and Brittany Zamora all would basically be getting this promotion. I think that this is something really, really cool that Busch Beer is doing. And what this is strategy, marketing, basically training, meetings, and all that stuff. It's basically to get promotion out there for female drivers in NASCAR as well. People wondering why Natalie Decker is not on this is because Natalie Decker is not 21. She'll be allowed to be in this group once she turns 21 years old, which I believe she turns 21 on July 31st or in the early portion of July. She'll be eligible for this promotion as well. Overall, I think that this is super, super sick and super cool promotion that Busch Beer is doing. I think this is huge for NASCAR. And again, this is going to be really, really good promotion for female drivers. And it will keep these female drivers in NASCAR as well with this promotion to be able to keep them, they're funded, keep these people in the sport. And I'm very happy to see that they're doing this really cool promotion. I think this promotion is really, really sick. It's really, really awesome. And I'm glad that they're doing this promotion, to be honest with you. I think it's a very big and really awesome promotion for the sport, to be honest with you. And now we're going to jump on to the next stories of today's episode, as now we're going to go ahead and jump into all the sponsor news that's happened over the last couple of days. And there have been a lot of sponsors and spotters that have been announced over the last couple of days. A lot of big spotter lineups. Let's start off with our Motorsports spotter lineup. So the 3 spotters they'll have in 2022. So for Brett Moffitt, he is going to have Chris Osborne. For Anthony Alfredo, he's going to have Rick Corelli. No surprise here. I think that was already announced, but it wasn't confirmed. But Rick Corelli is going to be spotting for that for Anthony Alfredo. And then for Jeb Burton, he's going to have Mike Herman Jr. 3 really strong spotters, 3 spotters that I think are going to overall do a really, really good job this year for the team. So really, really happy to see that they're going to be spotting in 2022. Then you've got 2 more spotters were announced for GMS Racing. Grant Enfinger will have Mike Herman Jr. as well, and Jack Wood is going to have Tyler Mott. Tyler Mott, of course, who is a spotter for Kyle Larson in the NASCAR Cup Series, and Mike Herman Jr., who I believe is also a spotter in the Cup Series as well, but also is going to be spotting for Jeb Burton in the Cup Series at Jeb Burton Xfinity Series as well. That's really cool to see. I'm glad to see both those spotters are coming in. Then ThorSport announced all their spotters for 2022 as well. For Ty Majeski, he is going to have legendary spotter Steve Barkdahl, a former racer who did pretty decent in racing, who will be the spotter for Ty Majeski. For Matt Crafton, he is going to have Jason Hedleski. Jason Hedleski, I think, is a veteran spotter who spotted for Thor Sport in the past. He'll be spotting for Matt Crafton. Then for Christian Eckes, he is going to have Chris Moniz, who's going to be spotting for Ty Dillon in the Cup Series. I think he's spotting for someone in the Xfinity Series as well. And then for Ben Rhodes, he's going to have TJ Bell as a spotter. No surprise, Ben Rhodes has had TJ Bell as the spotter in the past. So that's not a major surprise to me, to be honest with you. Then the next spotter that was announced was Chad Fincham. Chad Fincham is going to be spotting for Timmy Hill in the Daytona 500. Now, of course, Timmy Hill will have to qualify for this year's Daytona 500 in the 6.6 car. He's got a Roush Yates engine in the car this year, so he might be able to get that done. He's going to have a really tough task to get into this year's Daytona 500, but he does have a really cool opportunity here, and hopefully all the spotters that I announced could be able to help out here this season. So good luck to all of them, because this is going to be a lot of push for them, and hopefully they can do a really good job this year. And now we're going to jump on to the next portion of the episode, as now we're talking about all the crew chiefs that were announced so far in the last couple of days. Let's start off BJ Motorsports crew chief lineup, as they announced their crew chief lineup on Friday. For the 5 car, the BJ McClough for Matt Mills is going to drive a majority of the year. David Ingram is going to be the crew chief for him. For Josh Williams in the 78 car, Danny Johnson, I think had been a crew chief of BJ Motorsports for the last couple of years. He'll be the crew chief in the number 78 car. I think he's also crew chief for RCR Motorsports in the past as well. He'll be crew chiefing for Josh Williams. And then for the 99 car, that's going to be driven by Stephen Parsons the whole season. Mike Tyska, I don't know how you spell his name. He will be this crew chief for the 99 for BJ Motorsports this year. 3 solid crew chiefs. I think that they will do a really good job this year, crew chiefing this year. Next crew chief that was announced was Josh Graham. Josh Graham is going to be the crew chief for Faf Moffett when Faf Moffett drives in the Truck Series. We'll talk about how many races Faf Moffett is going to run in this season in just a little bit. But I think that Faf Moffett, having a guy like Josh Graham, who's worked as a crew chief and a driver in the past, I think is a really good decision for the team. So I'm happy to see that Josh Graham is going to be crew chief for him. I think having him work a veteran guy who has a lot of veteran presence as a crew chief, I think he'll do a really, really good job working with him, to be honest with you. Next crew chief was announced with Scott Eggleston. And Scott Eggleston is going to be the crew chief for Shane Lee at Daytona. Really not a shock to me. I think it was expected that Scott Eggleston was going to be the crew chief for Shane Lee at Daytona. He's got a little bit of crew chiefing experience, I think, with Rick Ware or MBM in the past, if I'm not mistaken. So cool to see Scott Eggleston is going to be crew chiefing once again. Next crew chief that was announced was Stephen Lane. As Stephen Lane is going to be the crew chief for Tate Fogelman throughout the 2022 season. Not a shock to me. Stephen Lane was a crew chief for the 30 car last year. So it's not a major shock to me that Stephen Lane is going to be the crew chief for Tate Fogelman this season. Next crew chief that was announced was Tim Silva. As Tim Silva is going to be the crew chief for Matt Jaskol in all of 2022. Tim Silva, I'm not sure how much experience he has as a crew chief, but hope he can do a really good job as a crew chief this season, because I think that's going to be a really tough position for him. Hope he can do a really good job this year. Next crew chief that was announced was Tim Vens. As Tim Vens will be driving for this team throughout the season in select races, he'll be the crew chief for Johnny Sauter. Johnny Sauter, of course, will be driving his truck for 13 races in 2022, and Tim Vens will crew chief for a lot of those races this year. So hope he can do a really good job as a crew chief. Next crew chief that was announced was George Church, as George Church is going to be the crew chief for J.G. Ely in the Daytona 500. Now, George Church, of course, will also, I believe, be the crew chief for J.G. Ely in another ride that we'll talk about here in the short future. But George Church, crew chief for J.J. Ely, it's going to be a tough position for J.J. Ely, but hope they can qualify in this year's Daytona 500. The next crew chief announcement that I think happened, the next crew chief announcement that happened was Joe Williams, as Joe Williams is going to be the crew chief for Joe Graf Jr. in the NASCAR Xfinity Series this year. Joe Williams has worked as a crew chief, I think, for Starcom Racing in the past, so he's coming back to work at BJ Motorsports this season. And next crew chief that was announced was Rick Bourgeoisie, as Rick Bourgeoisie is going to be the crew chief for Joey Gase in the NASCAR Xfinity Series at Daytona in multiple races as well. No surprise here, Rick Bourgeoisie, I think, has worked with Joey Gase in the past, so not a major shock to me that he's working with Joey Gase's team. And the final crew chiefs that were announced were RCR's crew chief lineup, as they announced the crew chief lineup on Friday. So Andy Street, already we knew that. Andy Street is going to be the crew chief for Austin Hill this year, and Jeff Stangowitz is going to be the crew chief for Sheldon Creed this season. Not a shock to me that James Sangowitz is working with Sheldon Creed again this year. Jeff Sangowitz has worked with Sheldon Creed for the last 3 or 4 years, and their relationship has gone very, very well. So it's not a major shock to me that Jeff Sangowitz is going to be the crew chief for this season. So really good luck to him, and hopefully that both these crew chiefs can do very well. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Faf Moffett. And Faf Moffett interviewed a friend of mine on YouTube, Casey Campbell, and a foil reporter of mine. And he said that Faf Moffett says that he has about 12 to 15 races that he knows that he'll be racing in 2022. Faf Moffett will be driving most of the year from the 43 car for Petty GMS Racing. He wants to run full-time this year, but funding will have to be a major thing that will have to come into play. STB is going to be sponsoring in a majority of those races that he has the 43 truck this season. Faf Moffett is someone that's very, very intriguing. It's someone I'm also not the biggest fan of, to be perfectly honest with you. I do like the truck that he's running. Do not get me wrong. I think the truck that he's running, I think is freaking sick and freaking badass. But to be honest with you, I'm not overall the biggest fan of Faf Moffett. I don't think Faf Moffett really deserves this ride. I wish someone else was getting into ride. But if Faf Moffett come in here and impress me and do really well this year, I think he's got a really good chance to do something this year. So hopefully Faf Moffett can do a really, really good job and do a really great job this year, because Faf Moffett is going to have a tough decision and choices to make. Hopefully Faf Moffett can do really good this year, get some top 10s, top 15s with the Petty GMS team. But honestly, my expectations are really, unfortunately, just not through the roof for the Faf Moffett, just because of the fact that Faf Moffett really has not done much in the NASCAR so far. So hopefully he can do really, really good, and hopefully he can have a great year in 2022 in his select races, because he's going to have a really tough position he's in. So hopefully Faf Moffett can do really, really good here in 2022, to be honest with you. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Eddie Tristanos. As was announced on Friday that Eddie Tristanos has been reinstated by NASCAR. The assault charges against him from an incident at Talladega was dropped by the district attorney earlier this month. For those who don't know, Eddie Tristanos was involved in a fight. I don't remember who it was. I think it was Clayton Hughes as a spotter for, I think it's Michael Medal in the Cup Series. He got into a fight with Clayton Hughes in the Truck Series, and I think Clayton Hughes, filed charges against Eddie Tristanos. Eddie Tristanos, of course, is the husband of Jennifer Jo Cobb, and I think that Clayton Hughes was the spotter of the 75 team at the time, and they got into a very big pit road altercation. Eddie Tristanos, of course, has been working in the sport for many, many years, but what he did was unacceptable. It's definitely unfortunate that they decided to drop the charges against him, considering the fact they basically, I think, paralyzed the guy. So I'm a little surprised they've gone ahead and dropped the charges against Eddie Tristanos, considering the fact of what happened in that situation. But overall, it is what it is. The charges are dropped, and he's been reinstated by NASCAR. He's going to have to toe the line and be really, really careful. But the charges have been dropped against him, and Eddie Tristanos hasn't reinstated back into NASCAR. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Drew Dollar. As was announced on Friday that Drew Dollar will be driving for Kyle Busch Motorsports' ARCA team in 2022 in the 18 car for 4 races in 2022. Drew Dollar has driven in the Truck Series for the last year or so. He drove an ARCA full-time in 2020, picked up 1 career victory with Billy Venturini's organization, but struggled after that. Then in 2021, ran part-time for Venturini Motorsports and struggled in there, and also ran part-time with Kyle Busch Motorsports and did absolutely horrendously. And now he's getting another opportunity in 2022. Would not be surprised if Sunbelt Rentals is probably who's going to be sponsoring him in 2022 in those select races. If you want my opinion on Drew Dollar, I'm not a fan of Drew Dollar. I think Drew Dollar is one of the worst NASCAR drivers I have ever seen in my entire life. I'm not exaggerating. You're in a Kyle Busch Motorsports truck, and you are running 20th to 25th. Do you really deserve to be in this ride? No, you absolutely do not deserve to be in this ride. I wish that they would have Sammy Smith running the season full time, because in all seriousness, I think that Drew Dollar is absolutely horrendous. I know that he's going to be in a good car again, and there's not as much competition this year. That being said, he's going to be expected to win, and honestly, I don't really expect much from Drew Dollar this season. I don't think Drew Dollar is that good of a driver. I don't think Drew Dollar's really done much so far in his career, and I don't really think Drew Dollar really deserves to be in this series, to be honest with you. He's not really that good. I think full-time ARCA would be really, really good for him. I know it is an ARCA team, but to be honest with you, I'm not overall the biggest fan of Drew Dollar. Hopefully he can prove me wrong and do really well. But to be perfectly honest with you, I'm not expecting much from Drew Dollar. So I'm not really pleased to see that Drew Dollar is getting this right. I'm not expecting much for him, to be honest with you, in KBM. He's going to be in a good car, but I'm not expecting much from Drew Dollar, to be honest with you. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Brett Holmes. As it's basically been revealed that Brett Holmes will be racing in the Truck Series opener at Daytona, driving the number 32 for his own organization. Brett Holmes Racing is expected to announce their whole season plans for 2022 in the near future. I would expect that they're going to run maybe the whole season or a majority of the season in 2022, most likely Brett Holmes being the only driver. Brett Holmes, of course, the 2020 ARCA champion, and also ran part-time in the Truck Series in 2021, with the team jumping up in 2021 with Sam Mayer driving part-time for the organization as well. Let's be for real, Brett Holmes' organization absolutely struggled in 2021. The only time they really were up front, unfortunately, was with Sam Mayer. That's no disrespect to Brett Holmes. I think Brett Holmes is a really talented and a really gifted driver. But when Brett Holmes is in the truck, let's be for real, Brett Holmes absolutely struggled. But I think the more experience that he gets, the better it's going to be for Brett Holmes. He's got a good opportunity right here, so he can prove me wrong and do very, very well. He will have to also probably qualify due to them probably not having enough owners points to run for the whole entire season. So hope he can prove me wrong. Hope he can do very, very well. And hopefully we can see Brett Holmes Racing do well. And I hope that Brett Holmes can have a great Daytona race and qualify his way in. Because if he can, I think he's got a decent shot. He's a pretty good super speedway racer, to be honest with you. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Harrison Rhodes. As was announced on Saturday, that Harrison Rhodes will be racing the 52 for Jimmy Means Racing in 2022, driving in the first 4 races of the season. Harrison Rhodes, this is the first time that he's raced, I think, since 2018 or 2019. I think he drove, I think it was for JD Motorsports a couple years ago. And Harrison Rhodes has had some decent success, but not really much has come out of his career. Sponsorship is definitely playing a big factor in him getting into this ride, to be perfectly honest with you. Harrison Rhodes, of course, like I mentioned, has been racing for quite a few years now, but hasn't raced in any series, I really think, since 2020, since 2019 or 2020. So he's going to have a little bit of inexperience now. It looks like he did overall get approved to race in a season opener. Again, it's been, like I said, it's been a few years since Harrison Rhodes has raced in this series. What are my overall expectations for Harrison Rhodes? Honestly, the car's not very good. This car will have to qualify for the race. And honestly, I'm not even sure if this car is going to make it in. Considering the competition that is showing up in the Xfinity Series this year, he'll have to qualify in for every race. And let's be for real, that 52 team was absolutely horrendous last year. They were basically finishing last almost every single race last year. They had, I think, a streak of 6 or 7 races where they ended up finishing last and getting barely any points and not finishing a race. So my expectations really are not for the roof, Harrison Rhodes. That's not saying that Harrison Rhodes is not a talented driver. I think Harrison Rhodes absolutely is a talented driver, but it's just that I don't really trust the ride, to be honest with you. So I'm not really expecting much from Harrison Rhodes this season. Hope he can do really, really well and prove me wrong, but to be honest with you, my expectations are not really through the roof for him, to be honest with you. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Natalie Decker. As was officially announced this morning, that Natalie Decker will be driving for Raymond Brothers Racing in the NASCAR Xfinity Series in 2022, driving the number 33 for the organization. Everybody knows who Natalie Decker is. Natalie Decker is a driver who ran full-time at ARCA in 2018 and absolutely struggled in the main ARCA series, where she had a couple standout performances, but she finished second to last in all full-time drivers in that respective series. And in 2019, drove basically most of his whole season in the 44 truck, but absolutely struggled with Nice Motorsports and has been driving part-time for the last couple of years in NASCAR's top divisions. It doesn't shock me he's in the ride. She does have some money that going in this. I think N29 Capital Solution, whatever the company that sponsor is sponsoring her and helping her have an opportunity to race once again. Now, Natalie Decker, I'll admit I've been a little hard on Natalie Decker because honestly, you expect a driver like Natalie Decker to do a little better with how much experience she has. And honestly, I've not been really impressed with her runs. That being said, though, she does have sponsorship and she does have a little bit of a personality. Look at her chats and stuff on Twitch. She does do stuff on social media and has a little bit of success. Now, let's talk about expectations for Natalie Decker. What are my overall expectations for her? I'm going to be real with y'all. I don't really have any high expectations for her. First of all, Raymond Brothers Racing is not overall really that fast of an organization. They don't seem to have a lot of pace and they don't seem to have a lot of speed over time. But if Natalie Decker could come out with some top 20, some top 35s in some top 30s and qualify into these events, I think she could do have a good year. But she'll only be part-time with the team this year. I would expect other drivers to get in this ride in the future and have good opportunities. But I'm happy at least she has a part-time ride. I don't hate Natalie Decker. I just been a little hard on her because you expect Natalie Decker to perform a little better than she has. That being said, though, I do hope that she proves me wrong, and I really do hope that she has some success this season because I think if she can have success, I think it'd be great for the sport. So hopefully she can come into this ride, have good success, and hopefully she can have a great year in 2022 as well, to be honest with you. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about J.J. Ely. As well, J.J. Ely will be driving the Cup Series to the Daytona 500. He'll also be racing in the NASCAR Xfinity Series at Daytona, driving the number 66 for MBM Motorsports in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. J.J. Ely, of course, like I mentioned, will be racing in the Cup Series to try to make it into the Daytona 500. He also will be trying to make it into the NASCAR Xfinity Series race as there's a lot of competition. J.J. Ely is a driver that's been also known to kind of be a little bit of bust in the Cup in NASCAR, but also has had some recent decent success and is a pretty overall decent driver. Now, how likely do I think he makes it into the show? I think MBM Motorsports actually is going to be a little bit better this year in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, and I think that this team is going to put a lot more effort into their equipment this year. As they've gotten longer in the series, the better they've gotten. So I think that J.J. Ely overall has a pretty decent shot to make it into the NASCAR Xfinity Series race as well. I think they're going to put a lot of money into that 66 car, and I think he's got a really good shot to make it in the Xfinity Series race. So I think J.J. Ely's got a really good shot. I think if he makes it in the show, I think he's got a shot for top 10 or top 15 if, of course, he survives the big one, because, of course, you're going to have to survive the big one. But I think J.J. Ely's got a really good shot to make it into the show. I think he can do it, and I think J.J. Ely could make it into this year's Xfinity Series opener as well, to be honest with you. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Alex Abay. As was announced on Saturday that Alex Abay will be returning to DGM Racing in 2022, driving for 18 races for the organization. He will drive the 90 car at Daytona, and then for a majority of the year, he will drive the 36 car. I am so happy that Alex Abay is back with this team. I think Alex Abay is a very, very criminally underrated driver. Of course, the Penny Series champion, I think in 2017 or 2018, if I'm not mistaken, and a very underrated and talented driver, especially on road courses. I've seen Alex Abay contend for top 20s and even top 10s on road course tracks and has performed extremely well on those types of tracks in the past. And I do think that he is someone that could have a pretty decent year in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. It is unfortunate he's not running full-time this year because they've got multiple drivers driving for the team. Of course, you got Mason Matthews driving the 91. You've got Kyle Weatherman who's driving part-time. Maybe they somehow get him in the 92 car for multiple races. Maybe they can get him to end up running full-time. But at least I'm happy that he's coming back. Overall, one of my expectations for Alex Abay coming into this season. I think Alex Abay is someone who's going to have a pretty decent year in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. I think he gets some top 20s. I think he gets some top 10s this year. I think he could surprise a lot of people this year in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. I think DGM is going to be a better team this year as well. I know they've got 4 cars in their stable, but I do think that DGM Racing is going to be a better organization in the 2022 season. And having Alex Abay come back to the team this year, I think is really, really awesome. And I'm really happy to see that he's back with the team this year. I think he's a really talented driver. It's unfortunate he's not full-time this year, but sponsorship probably played a major factor to that. So I'm happy to see Alex Abay is back with the team this year. Good luck to him because he's going to have really high expectations going into the season. To be honest with you, hopefully he can have a great year in 2022. And now we're going to jump on to the first of 3 major stories of today's episode as we are talking about Denny Hamlin. Now, it was announced on Friday morning that NASCAR had formed a driver's advisory council with 7 individuals, with Jeff Burton being the director of that group. And he had Denny Hamlin, Austin Dillon, Kyle Petty, I think a bunch, Corey LaJoie was part of that. I think Daniel Suarez also part of that. But a lot of people were part of that group. And someone asked, why is a guy who's an owner of the team coming in, an owner of a race team? And Bob Pockers also responded to this individual, basically saying that it's interesting because you have an owner who could give a very good ownership perspective. Denny Hamlin made a response to this situation, and he said that the drivers and the teams align at 95% of the time. When that 5% is in play, I will step aside on those issues. One thing is for sure, all parties have one common goal, and that is to grow the sport. I absolutely 1,000% agree with Denny Hamlin on what he is saying right there. I think the goal of everybody, what the goal of the driver's adversary program basically is basically what they're trying to do, is they're trying to grow the sport, enhance the sport, and give benefit to everybody. That's one of the big things they're trying to do with the driver's advisory program. And Denny Hamlin basically saying that bringing an owner into it and having an ownership perspective of someone who's part of that RTA group right now, having someone who's part of that come in and work with them is really, really important. I do think again, I'll say this about this whole Drivers Advisory Council. I think multiple people said this too, but I think that we are starting to see a major shift in NASCAR, especially when it comes to people being happy and drivers being happy with NASCAR's decisions. You look at some of the comments we made after the Busch Light clash. A lot of drivers were happy. You had Kyle Larson happy. You had Kyle Busch happy. Brad Keselowski, Kevin Harvick, and even Chase Elliott was super happy. And you were seeing some really good stuff. And I think a lot of this really started back when they decided to go with the 670 horsepower package instead of the 550 horsepower package. And then also how successful the Busch Light clash was and what the drivers felt about that. Drivers are very, very happy. When the drivers tend to be happy, fans are going to be more happy, in my opinion. So I think having drivers be happy like they are currently at the moment, I think is a major thumbs up. And Denny Hamlin really is on point with this, in my opinion. And as like I've mentioned, I really think that there is this major cultural shift that's coming in. Even Jeff Burns said it, basically saying this, and even NASCAR seems to be fully aware of it, and they seem to be really on board with it as well. And to me, I'm very happy to see this RTA becoming extremely, and I really want to see the Drivers Advisory Council stay around for a long time. I do think there might be issues where we see that not be as relevant, but I do think NASCAR hopefully will have to play. But again, NASCAR also has answered to so many different groups of individuals at once, and it's a very tough role that NASCAR has to play, and NASCAR is put in a very tough and a difficult position at the same time. So I think Denny Hamlin's really on point with this, saying that having an owner like him into the sport is major, and I think everyone knows that the future of the sport is in a much more promising position. I really am excited for the season. I think we've seen so much happiness with drivers recently. And like I mentioned, NASCAR fans are going to tend to listen to drivers. And if the drivers trust what NASCAR is doing, their NASCAR fans will trust what NASCAR is doing. Now, NASCAR will make decisions for themselves. And sometimes they think it's going to be good. Sometimes decisions they end up being really, really good for the sport. But I think what Denny Hamlin's saying is really on point in this situation, and I'm glad to see that Denny Hamlin brings up really, really good points, and I think Denny Hamlin really did a good job talking about this, to be honest with you. And now we're going to jump on to the next major story of today's episode, as we are talking about Austin Hill. As was announced a couple days ago, that Austin Hill will be driving the 7 car for Spire Motorsports in the Truck Series opener at Daytona. United Rentals will be the sponsor on this car. Austin Hill, let's talk about him. Austin Hill, of course, will be driving full-time for Rich Schultz Racing in the NASCAR Xfinity Series in 2022. It's throughout the 2022 season, 21 car. I am definitely shocked that Austin Hill is in this 7 car. I do guess that RCR does have a little bit of alliance with Spire Motorsports. So that's probably why he's getting into this car. But Austin Hill, actually, in all seriousness, has a pretty realistic opportunity to win this year's Daytona season opener. Austin Hill has won the Daytona season opener back in 2019. The first time he raced for the team of Hattori Racing, when he joined that team in 2019, he was able to go out there and win the race and hold off the rest of the pack. And a pretty successful career in the NASCAR Grand Prix Truck Series, and that is why he's jumping up to the NASCAR Xfinity Series. Like I mentioned, I think he's got a really good and a really realistic chance of winning this season. Now, talking about Spire Motorsports truck program, Spire Motorsports truck program is expected to be a part-time organization this year, and they're expected to have multiple drivers in their team in 2022. I would not be shocked if you see their Cup guys like Josh Wilkie and Corey LaJoie get a few starts this year. And I also would not be surprised if we see a driver like Garrett Smithley and even Landon Castle get some starts with the team. Why am I saying Garrett Smithley? Well, Garrett Smithley said he had a ride he was supposed to be announcing by sometime, I think the end of the last month, but I guess the ride didn't go through. But Garrett Smithley is a Spire client. Also, Landon Castle is a Spire client as well. But they're going to have a rotation of drivers. I wouldn't be shocked though if they have Austin Hill driving in a lot of these starts this year. This team will have Kevin Boneyman working as a crew chief. And I think the Spire Motorsports, looking at how competitive they're going to be, I think they're actually going to be more competitive than they are in the Cup Series. We've seen how Firmware Motorsports has done when it comes to how competitive they are. They're not as competitive in the Cup Series as they are in the Camping World Truck Series. And I do think that they will be more competitive this season. And like I mentioned, having Austin Hill driving for their team, they've got a really good realistic chance. And of course, they'll have to qualify because they don't have any owners points coming in this event unless they have acquired owners points. But they're not going to be a full-time team this season. So they're going to have to qualify for the Truck Series opener at Daytona. But I do realistically think that Austin Hill has a very, very good chance to make it into this year's Truck Series opener. And not only do I think he's got a really good chance to make it into the Truck Series opener, I do think he's got a really good and basically an awesome opportunity to win. Like I mentioned, I think Austin Hill's a really, really talented and a really, really gifted driver. And I think that Austin Hill in the 17 could win the event. But like I mentioned, not to qualify their win. But let's be for real. I think that they're going to easily be able to qualify their way in. I trust the team, and I think that they will qualify into the Truck Series opener at Daytona. And now we're going to jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we are talking about NY Racing. As we talked about this a couple days ago, as was expected that NY Racing was going to show up at the Daytona 500. Well, it is official. NY Racing is officially going to attempt to qualify for this year's Daytona 500. And as expected, Greg Biffle is going to drive for NY Racing. Jay Guy is going to be the crew chief for this team, and Grambling State University is going to be the sponsor for this car in 2022. I gave my thoughts already last week on the story, but I'm telling you, I am super pumped up and super excited to see this team actually showing up. The last time this team raced in the NASCAR Cup Series was in 2018 when they raced with JJ Yeley in the car. And there have been so many candidates that have been talked about that we're going to get in this car. You had rumors of Roger Cruz. Matt DiBenedetto was someone that was talked about. Yes, Matty D was someone who was talked about. Ryan Newman was talked about maybe getting into the ride. But then it came down to Greg Biffle. And we started hearing reports about Greg Biffle about a week ago when Greg Biffle was spotted at the RCR facility, basically getting his seat fitted. And then we saw the image this past week that the owner of the team, John Cohen, had put on a Snapchat saying that we were just finishing a few things up, getting the wrap ready to go. And now that they are going to show up at this year's Daytona 500. And like I mentioned in RCR, they are going to have an RCR prepared car. So they're going to have a pretty fast car. And they're going to have a car that potentially could qualify in this year's Daytona 500. But now talking about the caliber of Greg Biffle. Greg Biffle has been racing over the last couple of years. The last time he raced and attempted to race in NASCAR was in 2016 when he last raced at Homestead Miami Speedway. But over the last couple of years, Greg Biffle has been showing up in NASCAR in forms of racing. In 2019, he made his Truck Series return in a one-off with Coliseum Motorsports and went on to win the event, holding off a hard-charging Matt Crafton. Then in 2020, he raced for GMS Racing in the Truck Series throwback race at Darlington, where I think he finished, 17th or 23rd in the event. He didn't have as good of an event, but I think he finished in a top 20. And in 2021, he raced in the SRX and was very, very fast in that series. Well, almost won the SRX season opener against Doug Coby. He was Doug Coby's biggest competitor, won one of the heat races, and was able to go almost and win the overall event, but got beat by Doug Coby in the season opener. And now he's officially back racing in the NASCAR Cup Series. Greg Biffle, of course, is a 19-time winner in the NASCAR Cup Series. He's won the Southern 500, I think, back in 2005, and also has won a lot of other illustrious and really, really big events throughout his career. A guy that's known to be really, really fast at intermediate tracks. Now, Greg Biffle is going to be, I believe, is 52 or 53 years old, so he's going to be the oldest driver currently in the NASCAR Cup Series who will be racing. Another big question I do have is this team going to run just the Daytona 500, or are they planning to run more than Daytona 500? Are they going to be like the money team, and are they going to show up to multiple races, or is this just a one-off race where they're going to attempt to qualify? That's one thing that we'll have to wait on. But looking at the realistic chances, how well do I think the money team has a shot at making this year's Daytona 500? I realistically actually think that the money team does have a really good chance to make this year's Daytona 500. I really, really do. They've got an RCR prepared car, and Greg Biffle is still a driver that's very, very competitive. So I do think that Greg Biffle and NY Racing does have a really, really good shot. And this is also, by the way, the last entry that's going to be showing up. There are 42 entries that will be at this year's Daytona 500, and Greg Biffle's one of them. And you think also about the next-gen car as well and the success of it. Think about all the drivers you've got. You've got Borsett, who's going to be making starts at road courses. You've got Jacques Villeneuve attempted Daytona 500 and multiple other races throughout the year. You've had multiple drivers interested. Dale Jr., Tony Stewart, Carl Edwards has been interested in a next-gen car. And you've also got Jimmy Johnson, who's not ruled out the possibility of coming back for a one-off. This next-gen car is giving so many opportunities for old veterans to come back, and now Greg Biffle has joined the veterans of the sport. Overall, I'm super pumped up and super excited to see NY Racing showed up, and I'm happy that Greg Biffle will be the driver. So, anyway, that is for today's NASCAR news video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications to be notified when a video does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Let's get below for that and comment your thoughts on today's video. How excited are you to see NY Racing and Greg Biffle show up, and do you think that they'll make the show? Let me know in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about all the other stories we discussed here today on the channel? Let me know in the comments below. My Daytona 500 predictions video is going to be dropping. I'll be telling you I think is going to win, struggle, suck, and also I will tell you I think is going to be the ones that will make it into the show, among other things. So anyway, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's video. I'll see you guys next time. It's Daytona week. Get pumped up and get excited because we got some stuff coming that you guys I think are going to be really excited for. Take care, everybody.